Yeah. So welcome to this CPD session on mindfulness in the workplace. Chloe and I have prepared a little PowerPoint for you. So we thought for the first half of the session, maybe a little bit more about kind of the first part of the session for us to share a bit of the things that we both feel are important in that context. And then in the second part, there'll be space for your questions and your comments, your, whatever has come up for you. Does that sound like a good plan, or are there things that you'd like to say now before we get started? I've muted you all except for you, Chloe. But if you want to say anything, then please unmute yourself. And also, I think for both of us, it's probably fine if you do have a question or like a little clarification that might come up in the course of the PowerPoint, then feel free to quickly ask. But if it's a bigger question, then maybe it's nicer to keep that until the end of our PowerPoint thing. Yeah. Okay, so should I see if I can make it work?
PowerPoints aren't supposed to work, are they? They're supposed to test our mindfulness. Isn't that their role?
It might well be. Let's see. Haha. Not today.
Ah, here we go. Yeah. Fantastic.
Okay. Oh, so the only thing is, yeah, well, that's better. Okay. So, intro from us both. Chloe, do you want to start?
Yeah, hello everyone. Some of you know me already. So I'm Chloe, and I've been teaching the MA for probably about 10 years or something now. But also, as well as doing the MA stuff, run my own business, which is a kind of social enterprise stroke limited company, depending on, social enterprise in essence, in where my heart is, and limited company to get paid by some of the more difficult customers that I have. And the majority of the work that I do in that capacity is in the corporate sector and in the workplace. So I would say most of my work now actually is in that, of that nature. So I was very interested to do the session. Oh, what's happened? We've lost the PowerPoint. Oh, hang on a minute. Are you still there? Oh, is it Kristine we've lost? Yeah, I think have we lost Kristine? Kristine, are you there? Can you all hear me? Oh, well, we spoke too soon when we said that PowerPoints are not, are here to test our mindfulness, and Kristine said not. I'm going to carry on talking just and hope that she can come back on. Can any of you see Kristine, or is it just me? Okay, all right. So yeah, so just to carry on talking. So I have, oh, here she comes, I think. Yeah, no. Most of my work is now in business and in the corporate sector, and I really enjoy it, and have probably over the last 6 years, that's mainly what I do. A lot of the work I do is taster sessions, and that seems to be the most popular thing, between anything from sort of half an hour all the way up to a whole day. But I would say generally 2-hour taster sessions or an hour and a half taster sessions have become the most popular thing that I do. And sometimes people will move on after that to a series of workshops or even an 8-week course if they're really committed. And I do these sessions in companies, things like banks and supermarkets and I don't know, accountancy firms and hospitality, hotels and things like that. But I also do a little bit of leadership type stuff, and also work a lot for charities and for schools and councils and the NHS and Scottish Government, things like that. And I'm particularly interested to do this session because I think that working in business can get a bit of a kind of like get bad press in a way. And I often just hear about tokenistic attempts from businesses to get mindfulness in and they don't mean it. And also sometimes have a sense that people have a feeling that if you work in business, you've sold out a bit and you're doing it for the money and that you're not authentically doing anything of any value. And from my perspective, it's been nothing like that. And I feel the work I do has huge value and really I see wonderful changes in workplaces individually and culturally. And I think it's really nice that I can get paid to do my job as well. So I'm very passionate about it and very pleased to be able to share anything with you that might be helpful to you. We have you back, Kristine.
Yes, my computer decided to crash and to restart itself for some unknown reason. Anyway, that was
very weird happening. I just thought I'd do my introduction while we waited for you to come back. Oh no, has she gone again? Oh gosh. Kristine, are you here? Do you know what I think I might do is I may get the PowerPoint up myself and then at least, oh, you're back.
I'm back. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why that is.
Well, we can just start and let's have an agreement. If you keep going, what I'll do is I'll try and pull up the PowerPoint on I have a Word version, don't I? And I'll just keep working through it until we get you back.
Yeah.
If it keeps happening.
If it keeps happening.
That the little gremlin has gone and all will be well now.
Fingers crossed. So I don't have as much experience in working in workplaces as Chloe does, but over the years have done quite a few things as well. And yeah, maybe I'll just leave it at that and we'll just go into the topics. I'm very, this is where I share my screen. There. Yeah. So I don't know if you covered this bit already, Chloe, but we were just thinking beforehand of what are the kind of things that we've been doing in workplaces. And it's a whole variety of things. So taster sessions, workshops, 8-week courses, often shorter courses, yeah, and anything in between. So it's a whole range. And having sensitive conversations, negotiations about what is offered and how is a very important thing. And also we often find that we need to adapt whatever we have in mind to kind of make it fit with what is asked for or what is, yeah, what we're being invited to do.
So I was starting this one, I think, was I, Kristine?
Yeah. Yes, please.
Okay, so I was brainstorming things last night, thinking, so what is it? What does help things work well? So some of the things, these are some of the main things that I came up with. So getting a really clear brief at the beginning and understanding what the organisation's expectations are. This is really important because often you get a phone call and you can make assumptions that they understand what mindfulness is, that they know what's going on, what we're likely to be providing. And also it may be that they are getting you in because something's really going wrong in the organisation. Maybe there's been a whole load of redundancies. Perhaps I had one organisation where there'd been a suicide and that's why they were asking me to come in because there was a really traumatised workforce. Now that's a very important bit of information to know, isn't it, before you're coming into a room. So again, just because it's in the workplace, it doesn't mean that you're not going to encounter all the same issues that you will do running courses anywhere else. So getting a real sense from the organisation of why are they asking you in? Is it sickness? Is it stress? Has something happened? And that will help you understand the dynamics of the group and also will guide you in how you approach the workshop, what practices you might use, and also perhaps in parts of the teaching point or teaching points that you might want to emphasize and really make more of. So if people are struggling with change, you know, you may really make more of things relating to how to hold change, for example. So that was one thing that came to mind. And the other thing is that often when you walk into a room and you're just going in fresh, you don't know anything, you don't know the people. It's not like an 8-week course where you have a relationship over a period of time. It's quite nice to know if the people have been told they have to be there, you know, that HR have said there is a workshop and you must all attend, or whether they've said there's going to be a workshop, who would like to attend. So both can work. One is obviously more challenging than another, and you can usually tell by the body language, which it is anyway. If you walk into a lot of this, then you can kind of probably guess someone's been made to go. But good to know, if nothing else, so you can prepare yourself. Right? You know, take have a bit of a practice beforehand, and just know that you're going to perhaps have to do a bit more selling of it to a group like that, and to try and get more buy-in from them. Really think hard about how you can make it feel very down to earth and not scary. So ways of doing that might be to include lots of science and proof in the first 2 paragraphs of what you say, you know, so people are actually going to stay with you, so they're not just going to snooze and tune out, or worse, trying to disrupt what you're doing. And also to be really sensitive to potential group dynamics. So you may have this in your 8-week courses, perhaps there's a mother and daughter or a husband and wife, or friends or colleagues, and you're aware there could be some interesting dynamics going on there. But in an office more than ever, I would say, and a lot of the people come to my personal courses at home because of office politics and difficulties, maybe bullying or feeling undermined by people in the workforce. So when you're doing a course or a workshop, all those people might be in the room together, you know. So being sensitive to that, and you may find that inquiry can be a little bit quieter than it is in those organisations, because people simply don't feel safe to really share and relax. So good to be aware of that.
So other things that we felt are important to consider is the practicalities, really down to earth, basic practicalities, because you can get into all sorts of situations. Different types of rooms that the organization might think are perfectly fine for using, and we might have other ideas of. So really good to kind of, be as prepared as you can, if possible, seeing the space beforehand, seeing how you might need to rearrange things to work well in the situation. There might be a whole range of expectations also, both things that you might be hoping to do or things that they might be assuming you'll do. So really important to be as clear as possible beforehand and arrange things well. And then this may be more of a problem to some of us than others, but there's a part of the time is the actual workshop, but also there's quite a lot before and after, which, you know, when you're scheduling in a workshop, when you're saying yes to one, may be good to really bear that in mind. And with the negotiating and the arranging that might, planning that needs to happen beforehand, and then afterwards, again, there can be more things that kind of need tying up. So good to make sure that you schedule enough time for that, so that you don't suddenly find yourself in what often happens in self-employed life, the famine or feast syndrome, that you have loads of work and then no work, and then everything happens at the same time, which can be quite stressful.
Yeah, also just quickly to add to that, I put that one in through personal experience of just saying yes to lots of workshops and looking at my diary and thinking, yeah, I've got slots for all those. And then suddenly finding there I was with this unbelievably busy week with like 2 things in a day and all sorts of stuff. And when was I going to plan it? And then when was I going to have time to invoice it? Because the next week looked the same. So it's taken me a really long time to try and build in admin days and spaces around work. Yeah. So finding ways to make it accessible to the client group. This is so important when you're working in business. You know, if you float into RBS Bank wearing your kind of like a, you know, what clothes I might wear at Sammy Ling, with my, you know,
tie-dye hippie.
Tie-dye hippie with bells around my ankles. You know, I do quite like all that myself. But if I go into RBS Bank like that, people look at me and think, oh, do you know, this is obviously for people like her, you know, this isn't for me. And so it's not selling out, it's not being something you're not. I'm not suggesting that you go in with full, you know, power dressing shoulder pads and look like something that really isn't you. But finding your own version of what would be smart and what might make you feel, or more importantly, people in the group feel that you are accessible and kind of that they can see something of them in you. And I think that's really important when walking into these environments. So I do tend to wear smarter clothes, and I tend to wear sort of safer clothes than I might do normally. And I do give it some thought before I go. So using relevant examples and when teaching, this is really important. So an example of that might be if I was teaching students, I wouldn't, whilst teaching autopilot, say, well, when you're driving the car, and sometimes, you know, you get to, you know, I do use the example of driving the car, and you get to the other end and you don't know what you've been thinking about, or you've been planning a meeting that's gone wrong or something like that. That won't mean anything to students necessarily. So similarly in business, you might really think about when you're actually teaching, doing your usual curriculums, or you're teaching in your usual way, spend 20 minutes before you go in actually actively thinking of some alternative examples that will be understandable and kind of identifiable to this client group. So if you're working in a call center, you may use the example of being on the phone all the time, or, you know, just finding ways to make it seem like you've thought about it and it's really for them, and it's not just a one-size-fit-all workshop. And I think that the way we teach, certainly what I've found over the years, is the more down to earth I am in these particular kinds of pieces of work, the better, because there can be some fear around mindfulness, and definitely a feeling that it's not for busy professional people who are serious and who are driven and who, you know, like working hard. You know, those people will be fearful of this potentially and think it's for another kind of person. So I always spend a lot of time talking about how driven I am and the work I've done before I was a mindfulness teacher, and actually give that a voice really early on. You know, it's the busy people like us who need it. So reassurance it's secular and not esoteric, things like that can really help. And I have found that for me, it's quite important to provide some follow-up materials, although it's never really requested, because I think if you go into a room for an hour and a half, there may be one person or two, or maybe even more than that, who really feel something has happened or have a sense this could be for them, and then they don't know what to do next. And the organisation may not have the money to pay for more workshops. So I will always follow it up with ideas of places that people can practice, audio tracks, but potentially written versions of what we've done, so that people can begin actually doing the practice if they want to.
Yeah, so this one is also a very important one, kind of in the early stages, that making sure that your organization actually has a clue about what mindfulness is. You know, certainly the finer points of it not just being something that you hear and that you understand cognitively and that you then have got, is something that always needs saying, that it's a practice and it takes time, and no, you can't just do a one session and then you're experienced in mindfulness, you know. And using an example, like it's like learning to play an instrument, or like it's a new skill. Yes, you can sit down and make sounds on a piano without being taught, but actually if you really want to utilize this and this potential in yourself, then practice, and therefore time, and therefore on their side, if it's a course, then actually some investment is really important. Yeah, and Chloe, you had some funny examples with this one, and maybe you want to say a bit more about it.
I can't remember what they were now. Can you remind me what they were, Kristine?
Just kind of the level of what people might be expecting of, that they might have ideas of, oh, you could just do this, and we think, oh no, that's totally not suitable.
Yeah, I was trying to think of the examples. That has happened a lot of times. I've done a conference before, you know, where people just were all over the place and had turned out being expecting a PowerPoint, you know, and then I turned up doing an experiential workshop, and of course it didn't work, and it was really awkward for everybody. And so I think that if you can be really, really clear, you know, oh, I know the example, Kristine. I was talking about, I got asked to do a conference for a university for students, and the woman on the phone sounded like she really understood what it was, all mindfulness. And she said, I've got quite a clear idea of what I want, and I've seen something online, and I think that the stages, the titles of this thing, if you could maybe do chapter 3, 4 and 5 in this 50-minute workshop, and it will work really well. So I thought, okay, she sounded like she knew what she was talking about. And then I went and she sent me the document, and it was like the sort of practices you do at the end of the compassion year, maybe, or in insight. And this was meant to be for 15-year-old students, and it was only a 50-minute workshop or something, you know. So it just was clear suddenly that she had no idea about mindfulness or what this really could look like. So I had to go back to her then and say, and have a meeting face to face. I thought that'd be easier, and just sort of explain it. It's a really lovely idea, but unfortunately we need much more time to do that justice. And I felt it would be better to teach them a really basic breathing practice, so that if they could understand that, that would be more helpful for them than bombarding them with a whole load of stuff that really they wouldn't have time to take in. So that's a concrete example of a misunderstanding where someone on the phone really sounded like they knew what they were talking about, and then when I scratched the surface, didn't at all. So money, haha, the thing that everybody feels funny about. Maybe not everybody, but certainly I did to start with. It's difficult, isn't it, to work out how much to charge for things, and it can still be difficult. So I think it's all about finding the balance, really. When I started off working, I did do a lot of work for free, loads for free actually, and that's kind of how I started up, you know, really, and got a reputation, and started to get, to find my feet, my teaching feet. However, if everybody does that, then it brings the whole market value down, and then none of us can get paid at any point because people expect it for free. So it's about finding this balance and just being mindful that whatever you charge will be impacting on what other people can charge in the future. So it can be quite tempting to offer it for very little to start with, just so we can get the experience. But if we do that too much, when you are ready to earn money, the price will have gone down so much that you overall probably will lose out. So just being mindful of that. And I do think, from my experience, fees do vary considerably, from really nothing all the way up to very well paid work, depending on the organisation and what they have in their training budget, and also how they see it. If they're seeing mindfulness like a yoga session, they're likely to pay very little. If they're seeing mindfulness like any other training that they're giving their staff, if they're giving it that much, or investing that much in it, then you will get proper training fees. I think it can be nice to check in with colleagues, and me and Kristine were talking about this earlier. It can feel a bit awkward, and some people, it's true, will not feel happy sharing what they charge, but many people will, and I think that a bit of a transparency here can help each other. And also, you know, if I'm charging £1,000 for a workshop and then you charge 100, and I don't tell you I'm charging 1,000, by the way, I never have charged 1,000, but you know, in my dreams. But if I was doing that, then you know, it's not, I'm not helping myself either, am I? And I'm not helping you. So I think most of us are fairly open about these things, and at least can give you an idea of the sorts of ranges of what can be charged if you ask. And yeah, things to consider when you're working out what to charge. How much do you need? You know, so if I'm doing a workshop, if someone wants a 50-minute workshop, but it's in Aberdeen, you know, that's a whole day of work for me. I can't do anything else that day. So it may only be 50 minutes, but I have to charge a day rate, really, unless I really want to do it, or it's an investment for other work or things like that. So really think about it. How much preparation time are you going to need to give? Is this a totally something from scratch that you're going to need a week to write? You know, you've got to really think about things like that, I think, when you're deciding how much the workshop is worth. And then travel time as well as the time you're doing it. And then afterwards, it's not like you just leave. People usually want to talk to you, and I rarely am out the door within half an hour of finishing a workshop, or might be thereabouts if I'm lucky. And have a look at their budget. You can even ask them, what's your budget? You know, because charities may only have, like, who was I working with the other day? It's a charity, and they have their training budget for the whole year is 250 quid, you know. So I kind of came in as cheaply as I felt I could afford to for them. That if I'm going and doing something for Tesco's, I know that they pay money for other trainings, and I think it's reasonable to expect mindfulness to be well paid as well. So just bear in mind the difference between some organisations and what they can offer. And also, you don't always get to find this out, but I would say increasingly organisations are not just coming to me, they're getting several quotes. So I am actually having to quote lower now than I've ever quoted, because there are so many other teachers now doing this who are quoting really, really low. So just bear that in mind. If they're coming to you through recommendation and it's just you, then you don't have to think like that. But if they're going to get a few quotes in and you really want that work, then you might want to come in as competitively as you can.
Yeah, I think the point of talking with others, particularly in the beginning, is a really, really important one. And Chloe and I have often done that together, and also with many other people, just this, like, okay, so I've got this new job and I'm not quite sure what to charge. What do you think? Is this too much? And yeah, but they said this, and when I asked that, and yeah, just kind of talking it over together so that you come up with yeah, that you start off from a place that you feel reasonably confident about. And I've really felt that was a process of valuing myself and the time and the experience that I have, as well as whenever anyone asks me how much do you charge, well, that depends on who you are. I really love being able to offer something for next to nothing to a charity or to an organization that I think, well, you know, they can't afford it, and this would be very meaningful for them. And then in order to be able to do that, when there is a big company, a Skyscanner or a Tesco or something kind of serious, then okay, well, let's ask for serious money then, and then somehow that balances out. Yeah. So it's really important to have the conversation also with the person, and they'll try to make you say the first talk money first. But if you can, yeah, and ask them very directly, like, what would you normally pay for a session like this, or what would be within your budget, and I'll see if I can work with that. Then yeah, it's often a bit of like showing your colors first, and who does that. So if there's any more questions about this, we can really come back to it at the end, but let's just keep going. We've got a few more slides. Is that okay for you at this point?
Yeah, I was just going to say very, very quick thing, which is it's useful before you go into those conversations, as Kristine said, where you're going to say, show me your hand, that you have an idea in your head of what you're prepared to do it for. Okay, so you don't get kind of seduced into doing something for much less than you can actually afford to do.
Yeah. And you can also always say, okay, that's great. I need a little bit of time to think about it, or to see how that fits in other work I am doing. You know, you don't have to say there and then. You can really, yeah, do it on your terms.
Yeah, it can be good sometimes to just say, sometimes I've found myself saying to people, well, ballpark, you know, roughly, I'd need to go back and look at my invoices, but just off the top of my head, it would be roughly around this amount. And if they then go, then you know you can think about it and take some off that and then send the final quote to them that way. So that can work sometimes. So you're giving them a rough idea and just testing the water, how they're responding to that. Are they like, oh yeah, that's fine? And you say, oh, okay, great. Or, oh, okay, that's going to be way too much for them.
So then we've got a nice list of challenges, 2 pages long. I'll just go through it quite quickly. One real challenge is that very often you only have a brief time to convey everything you know and you want to give them. Really difficult. Also, the sense of having to win people over quickly because there's only a short time, or you might only have one session. So it can be more stressful in that sense. Balancing what they think they need and want with what you think and what you know is of value. So particularly around length of sessions, length of courses, the inclusion or exclusion of the day practice. These are often, yeah, kind of negotiating areas. And finding in yourself how you feel about doing shorter courses. Like I had a time when I just didn't feel that I wanted to do that. I was like, look, it's an 8-week course, and if you don't have 8 weeks, then I'm not your person. And at other times I felt actually there is value in just giving a light introduction and really pointing people to where to follow this up. So it's something that you have to feel in yourself as well. How can you be true to what you know is right, as well as kind of have the conversation and negotiate and find a way together. Attendance is often an issue, and part of that might be that sense of there, like often in a workplace it's during work time, and all their distractions, their to-do list is just next door. You know, you're often in their workplace, and so it can be so easy for people to last minute get kind of interrupted by a phone call or an unexpected meeting, or just that sense, yeah, but I've got too much to do, I can't afford to do it today. The venue might have issues, as well as that. Particularly when I started off, I was quite dismayed at the places that I found myself in, smelly classrooms just after teenagers had left it, and me thinking like, oh, you know, compared to my nice Buddhist center, how is this going to work? And then finding that halfway in the course, people said, oh, you know, when I come into classroom T11, I already feel calm and nice and happy, and thinking, oh, okay, so maybe the fact that the floor is a tip and that it's uncomfortable plastic chairs and still smells of teenagers doesn't actually matter that much. So yeah, different situations. Office politics, of course, kind of those relationships dynamics that Chloe touched on already. If people are or aren't self-selecting, how much are they invested? Also, if people don't pay for it themselves, they're often less committed. And then, yeah, then there can be that kind of group thing of people feeling self-conscious about trying out something new, about, yeah, just kind of things that you wouldn't really get in groups that have self-selected and are paying and self-funding groups.
Yeah, and things like that. I'm thinking of the raisin exercise. You know, I've done that once for a company where, I mean, you often get a few people laughing or giggling or losing it, but there was a couple of people who actually had to leave the room. They actually could not. They were broken with laughter, just broken, and didn't know what to do with themselves. And that was quite hard to work with. And so I still do. I think mindful eating is really important, but I might often in a corporate environment choose to do it with chocolate because it feels more familiar and slightly less ridiculous, inverted commas, than one raisin. You know, it's a nice chunk of chocolate. You know, people like chocolate. feel a little bit more comfortable. So, you know, when we're talking about adaptation, you know, and being sort of flexible, and thinking a little bit about who you're working with, that might be a concrete example of that. Also, by the way, just with that, on that front, I do also always bring a tangerine, and, you know, maybe a raisin too, because in a workplace you're going to have all sorts of allergies, all sorts of intolerances. I have also had to have people just doing it with a glass of water because there was really nothing they could eat or they didn't want to eat. So just always having something like that up your sleeve so everyone can take part if they want to. So challenges, Mark 2. Self-promotion, getting the work. Yeah, that is quite tricky. I've found personally that I haven't had to go too much down the road of sending out emails and saying, hi, you know, to a company, I offer mindfulness, are you interested? It's been very much my public courses that I've been running where people have said, oh, I wish you'd come into my workplace, you should meet my boss, gosh, she could do with mindfulness, or that kind of thing. And then suddenly I find myself in their workplace, and it's really grown from that. So I always think just working, wherever you're working, is going to generate this kind of work. Just every workshop you do, everything you do, paid or unpaid, in my experience, generates, even possibly 3 years later, you get a random phone call from someone who was in that workshop saying, listen, I came to a talk you did at the library, you know, for free 4 years ago, and actually now I'm working for this company, they're really into mindfulness, do you want to come? You know, so nothing is wasted would be the message I would give you on that front. But of course there are things you can do, and I would always suggest that if you're starting out, to start with the contacts that you already have. So an example of that might be, rather than writing to every bank that you know when you have no particular affinity with a bank, if you're attending a Weight Watchers class, for example, then talk to the leader about whether or not you might offer a mindfulness course at the Weight Watchers class. If you're working with students, maybe speak to the staff members whether they'd be interested. Maybe you used to work in a particular area and you understand that area quite well and you still have contacts there. So start with the low bearing fruit, I would say. And then from there, you get experience under your belt, and then the higher, if you like, fruit starts to sort of drop on its own. That's been my experience. Getting paid has become really difficult. I'm sorry to say, everyone. This year, last year is the most difficult year I've ever had to get paid in terms of the preparation to get paid. Virtually every company, I had to spend at least half an hour filling out forms before I could do a 2-hour workshop, while they assessed whether I was self-employed or something else, or it just seemed to go on forever. And this is all to do with new laws and stuff, employment laws that have come in. So just be warned, it has got more difficult. And then the actual payments of the invoices seem to just get longer and longer apart. You know, a couple of months to get paid is not at all unusual. So just bear that in mind when you're budgeting, or when you're thinking about, you've done some work and you're thinking about how much money you've got, that you do need to be prepared to wait sometimes for a long time. Legally, I think they're supposed to do it within a month, but it doesn't really work that way. Tax returns, oh, I'm in the middle of this myself, so big groan coming at you from me here. It's very challenging when you're doing a lot of this work, I've found, because you're just doing loads of 1 hour or 2 hour jobs, you know, so there's just so many different clients. And whereas, say, my husband, who was a freelancer, might do 3 contracts a year, it's pretty straightforward. So essential to keep track of it in a way that makes sense to you. I'm hopeless at this, by the way, and I've learned this through painful experience. Because I'm very computer illiterate, I have found a system that works for me, which is simple, and I've created a table. I mean, those of you who use Excel, it would be far, far better. But if you don't, just creating this table, and then one column is invoice number, and I just allocate a number to every invoice I send out. And then another column is how much the invoice was for. And then another column is the date I issued the invoice. And then the other column is the date the invoice was paid. And then what I do is, as I go down that, it's all in normal font. And then, yes, that's right. No, it's all in bold. And then when it's paid, I take the bold off. So then I can just quickly scan down my sheet and see what's in bold. And they're the people I have to chase who haven't paid me and it's 3 months later. Okay, so that's my version of that. Now, there are packages that do all this for you that I'm terrified of that would make it much easier. But I'm just sharing that with you because if you are a bit like me, you do still need to have a system. You have to have something. Otherwise, you simply will lose track of it and you won't even know where to start when it gets to tax time. And I have that.
Yeah. Luckily, there's also joys.
Hey.
In fact, there's many joys. So there can be a real sense of making a difference. People often are really grateful and find that their stress in the workplace gets less. The sense of cultures changing, of sometimes also people kind of waking up to the reality of like, gee, you know, I'm working here. This is not how I want to spend my one wild and precious life, and quitting after a mindfulness course. That may not be what your company intended when they got you in, but it's definitely happened several times in my experience, and it's really satisfying in its own way. You know, that sense of someone actually daring to live the life that they want to live. Yeah, the reducing suffering element, which is, you know, maybe similar to other courses. It can be better paid than other work. It can be well paid. Often interesting, you know, a real variety of places you might find yourself in. Certainly challenging. And there's, yeah, having worked for myself for 10 years, I really appreciated that. I really loved being my own boss, being my own kind of, yeah, steward of my, or captain of my ship. And that sense of that any work that I got was really because of me, you know. So definitely hoping that this is that this is inspiring rather than off-putting.
Yeah, I would just to come in there about the changing the culture of an organization from the inside out. As I alluded to earlier, there can be some cynicism about mindfulness in the workplace, and you can hear a lot of negative stuff about it. But I have seen some amazing changes in an organization, and particularly when it's caregivers. And what I really like, I mean, you always have that, as Kristine said, with any 8-week course. But if you're working, running an 8-week course in an organization, chances are there are all people from all different departments, or people all different kind of levels or layers, if you like, from the company. So you might have a managing director and you might have someone, you know, a cleaner, all in the same group. And what I see time and time again is how mindfulness is a great leveler, and it transcends position, it transcends culture, it transcends work, it transcends everything. And everyone is just a person, just a human being with a tricky brain and a heart beating, all sharing the same air. And that, just that in itself can absolutely transform a team. I've seen teams really gelling beautifully because of mindfulness in the workplace, and I really think it's that, because people see each other for what they really are, outside of their title, outside of their role, and then they improve, their communication improves enormously. And all the things that we know to be true from the work we do in our 8-week courses to the public, you know, learning to listen, learning to really observe the reactivity that we're experiencing rather than acting out from it. These are things that within an organization can be transformative, particularly.
So there's certainly more to say. And yeah, maybe one more thing that I've become more aware of recently has been how as well as all this potential of really wonderful changes, sometimes mindfulness is also used to not look at what's actually going on. You know, if the stress load or the workload or the stress levels, if they're just through the roof, a mindfulness course is not going to fix that. You know, sometimes more systemic changes are needed. So yeah, to kind of just have that in the back of your mind as well, that being realistic about what it can and can't do.